Coming up, meet a journalist who covered the 9/11 attacks 20 years ago, plus the importance of early childhood education and sacred sites. I'm Patty Thalohungba. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from Indian Country Today.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. Working with award-winning professors, Cronkite students learn news reporting, social media, shooting and editing videos, and producing content for communications industries. Cronkite's 15 professional programs give students the opportunity to cover critical issues throughout the U.S. and beyond. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalohungba. California is gearing up for its recall election taking place next Tuesday. The state is home to 109 federally recognized tribes. Many have criticized the response of California's Governor Gavin Newsom to the COVID-19 pandemic. On Tuesday, voters will decide whether Newsom should be removed from office. More than a dozen candidates are currently running. Tracy Edwards is the CEO of the Redding Rancheria in Northern California. She says the sentiment of Native people in the recall has been split. Edwards says if Newsom is removed, it will result in California tribes having to teach the new governor about tribal affairs.
I think it's going to be very difficult. If you look at any of the list of candidates in the recall, we're basically starting back at ground zero, teaching our elected officials about tribes. None of them have any history with tribes. I can't tell that any of them have spoke on any tribal issues. So we'll essentially be starting over again. We've been working with this administration on a lot of issues. We've been working with him on repatriations, cultural lands, gaming issues. So I think it will set us back, and we'll be back in education mode, which is terrible that we have to educate any of our elected officials. But I think if anybody else is elected, that's the state we'll be in.
Edwards said no candidate in the election has reached out to her tribe to campaign. Other tribes, including the Yurok, have taken to social media to express their views. On Wednesday, the tribe said it opposes the governor's recall. Many drew criticism on this view, according to the Post comments. They encouraged others to vote yes on removing Newsom from office. Some voters will head to the polls Tuesday, while others are voting by mail. Cleanup and recovery from Hurricane Ida will take months for people living along the southeast coast. 15 tribes were in the direct path of the hurricane. Many say it is a wake-up call on the accelerating effects of climate change caused by burning fossil fuels. The United Homa Nation is the largest tribe in the region, with 19,000 people spread across 6 parishes, and it's suffered some of the worst damage. August Crapel, principal chief of the United Homa Nation, whose tribe is still without phone and internet service, talked about the devastation.
The United Homa Nation is over 19,000 people spread out between 6 different parishes along the Gulf Coast. And 5 of these parishes got hit very hard. I have over 11,000 tribal citizens that got affected by this hurricane. Some of our people have a half a house. Some have no house to go home to.
Principal Chief Crapel says because they are state-recognized tribe, federal aid is not directly available to them, but the nation is working to help its citizens. In Oklahoma, an award-winning artist and manager of the Cherokee Language Program, Roy Bonney Jr., has been selected as the Northeastern State University's 2022 Sequoia Fellow. Bonney says since he was a child, he was a fan of Sequoia and his legacy. He added it's humbling to be named as a recipient of a fellowship bearing his name. The program provides an opportunity for NSU and the College of Liberal Arts to recognize a scholar in Native American studies. They will also have an opportunity to share their experience with the NSU community. He's the 7th Sequoia Fellow since the program was created in 2009. Past Sequoia Fellows include former Principal Chief Wilma Mankiller and Kim Teehee, the first ever Cherokee Nation delegate to the U.S. Congress. And congratulations go out to the Iroquois Nationals lacrosse team as it sweeps the competition. Last weekend, the team won the first ever Pan American Lacrosse Association Sixes Cup. The Nationals beat Puerto Rico with a score of 17-9 in the championship game held in Auburndale, Florida. The team also finished with a plus 64 goal differential, according to USA Lacrosse. Teams from as far away as Peru, Argentina, and Colombia participated in the men's and women's senior divisions. The Nationals are scheduled to compete in the upcoming Super Sixes tournament hosted by USA Lacrosse next month in Maryland. Well, you may have seen her on the hit TV show The Voice, and now Brooke Simpson is taking her talents to another show, America's Got Talent. The Hawaii-Saponi citizen clinched her spot as a finalist after singing a cover of Ed Sheeran's Bad Habits Tuesday night. Judge Simon Cowell said Simpson 100% deserves to be in the final. Prior to this, she's had the opportunity to work with artists like Miley Cyrus, Sia, and Taboo of the Black Eyed Peas. NBC's America's Got Talent will crown a new champion next Wednesday. The winner receives $1 million and a headline slot at a Las Vegas show. And those are the headlines for Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalahungva. Coming up, we take a look at early childhood education and learn about sacred sites.
And we meet an extraordinary musician. Plus, we honor the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Stay with us.
This is Indian Country Today.
Charlie LaDuff was a reporter at the New York Times in the spring of 2001. He had just won his first Pulitzer Prize. Charlie was covering the union and labor groups in the fall of 2001 when the terrorist attack shocked the world and the country. For the next year, he reported from Ground Zero. He joins us to reflect on that day.
Do you remember in 2001, the Supreme Court handed the election to George Bush, the disputed dangling chads? Remember that? Al Gore steps aside. They wrote everything about dangling chads except the working man who was the mechanic for those phone booths or those voting booths. The reason I say that is New York in 2001 had this matching program for anybody that wanted to run for citywide office. $4 for every dollar you raised. So as you might imagine, there was like 500 people on the local ballot. So I set it up to go out with a voting booth mechanic. I meet him in Brooklyn. He's drunk as a skunk. It was funny. We're in a parking lot. And he says, hey, look, you could see the Twin Towers from, Brooklyn, lower Brooklyn. He goes, something hit that? And we were looking at it. We thought it was a small Cessna. And we watched about 15 minutes later, a second explosion, and you knew it wasn't. So quickly make my way, finally get over to Manhattan with the United States Army on a bus. And it was surreal, man. It was like the small streets, the colonial streets in lower Manhattan were covered in this tan dust. They were empty, it was quiet, and there were 10,000 shoes all pointing north. People ran literally out of their shoes. And at that point, it wasn't really a reporter because the cell phones had gone dead and everything. And it was just all hands on deck. Can you find somebody alive in this molten, smoking, dusty graveyard? And the one vision I have is that pile of steel was about 4 stories high. And the iron workers were down there with their own kits, their own tools, their own torches. And they had gone into Brooks Brothers and got themselves cashmere coats and fedoras, and they're wearing these with their goggles, and the sparks are flying. And it was perhaps the most exhilarating and saddest night I've ever spent on Earth.
Charlie stayed at Ground Zero to continue to report for the Times.
We take out the reporters for a minute. We just talk about humanity. The thousands of people, substantial, ordinary people who answered that bell. You didn't know if something else was coming. And they just came. And by morning, there were no authorities. The authority, forget the head boss man, because when it really hits, they're nothing. Natural leaders evolve. And it started to thin out. It was a crime scene. It was a recovery scene. And so everybody that had a badge was starting to take control. Police, fire, paramedics, you name it. And I came out of the hole to go north to Times Square, where the New York Times, which New York Times Square is named after the New York Times. And I had to give them my notes, And I turned in my notes, and I'm coming back down. I'll never forget him, head of security for the New York Times, Danny. I said, Danny, I think I'm gonna need a badge to get back in. And I don't know what to do. And I don't want to lie, because you don't want to lie as a reporter. And yeah, Danny gave me his badge. Said New York Times, see ya.
Yeah.
And after a couple of months, I wanted to give it back to Danny, because the working people had given me a construction badge, and Danny said, keep that. And I'll never forget Danny. So yes, secretaries, nurses, reporters, paramedics. I'm sorry, Mark, I hadn't prepared, but it's all flooding back. I remember that second day, and all the volunteers, people wanted to help. People could still be alive. They only found 12 people, but we all wanted to help. So they were putting people in groups and sort of staging areas to the side, getting you a pair of gloves and buckets. And I remember the Sharpie going around, and everybody was writing their phone number and their blood type on their arm in case they fell through this molten crag and crevices. And I remember, that's my reporter eye. I remember the area codes. 718, that's Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn. I remember 516, that's Nassau County. I don't remember a 212. Not one. They could have been there. I didn't see them. They weren't prevalent. 212 is Manhattan. It's where the swells live. So when you look at who does what in this country, it's the ordinary, everyday, working people who love their kids, and they love their fellow man when it really matters. And there was a firefighter. His name was Sean Cummins. Sean was, he wouldn't say it, but he was the #1 recovery guy. He was like a jockey of a man, his build, and he was trained for rescue in small crevices. So he was the guy who was crawling actually under the pile looking for people. I wrote about him a number of times, and he was probably did 2,000-3,000 hours in there. I wrote about him a couple of times. He was fed up. He was broken down. He was sick. And our last meeting was at a coffee shop in Manhattan. He goes, look here, mate. He's, from Ireland. I'm done with the hero thing. Not everybody that wears the badge is a hero. Not every hero has a badge. And that was the last, after 6 really intense months together, it's the last I ever heard of him. And he called me last night. And it was like yesterday. We spoke for 4 hours. He volunteered for Iraq as a paratrooper. His son is a special operations soldier. He got the ground zero sickness. It's in his throat. My friend Eddie Keating, one of the greatest photographers of the turn of the century, he's got brain cancer. I'm pretty sure it's from there. So yeah, God bless the firefighters, and God bless us all, I suppose.
Thank you, Charlie LeDuff, reflecting on reporting for the New York Times at Ground Zero. When we come back, we'll hear how children are getting a good start. Early childhood education is essential for the development of youth to be successful in school and beyond. Maria Montessori was an Italian physician and anthropologist who devoted her life to understanding how children develop socially, intellectually, physically, and spiritually. Now, Native American educators are indigenizing the curriculum at the Montessori American Indian Child Care Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Janice LaFleur is the founder. She's a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa.
Early learning, we value it because it is the foundational experiences. And that's what we want to give to our children in all of our Indigenous communities is a strong foundation. We want to be able to build a strong foundation that is anchored in our cultural values. And Montessori is very conducive to recognizing that. When you approach learning from an individual child-centered perspective, you are able to embed language, culture, and our values, and we live and practice it every day in our children's house. So those cornerstones are our cultural values. We learn how to be kind, how to be loving, how to be generous with each other. And those are some of our most important values: to be brave, to be courageous. And we use those terms every day with our children. We also use them in both either the Ojibwe language or the Dakota language. And language becomes an important part of those beginning experiences. What children are going through in the years between 3 and 6 years old, which is our target age, the primary age, is that they are making concrete the experiences that they've been having up until that time. So as they join us, we begin to give language to the experiences. Children have a very unique period in that time called the sensorial periods. And so we help refine what things taste like, and we give it a name, what things smell like, and we give it a name, and we give names to all of the things around us, including all of our stories from Nana Bajou and Iktomi, and how we learn from our animal brothers and sisters.
The school started in 2014. What are some of the success stories that you've seen in that period of time? And what can we learn from that?
Oh, many, many wonderful things. So we've been around for about 7 years. We just celebrated our 5th graduation cohort. We celebrate graduation as those children are prepared to go to elementary school. And in that preparation, we like to think of our children as being well prepared. They are confident. They are excited about learning. They've got a very strong base in their academics. Many of our children are already reading and doing the 4 operations of math, and all of the sounds that the letters make. All of that is a big part of our work. And so when they're off to elementary, they're well prepared as young, proud, and we call them our young Native leaders.
Thank you, Janice LaFleur from the Montessori American Indian Child Care Center in Minnesota. Patty Telehangba caught up with musician Laura Ortman in France, where she was on the last day of her Jerome Camargo residency. She's a classically trained violinist, but her music is far from traditional.
I was trained classically, and then that was a long time ago. I've been doing collaborations with other Indigenous artists, dancers, storytellers, poets. I try and collaborate with other people just to kind of break out of any kind of like normal violin, like snooty tradition kind of things. Because, I'm given this opportunity to work with some really, really wonderful artists. So it's only fair if we kind of meet in our own ways together, instead of like hey, I'm a classical violin. I'm not a classical violinist anymore. I'll start out with a vision. And I just, I'm stunned and I'm always trying to think about what kind of story or atmosphere we're trying to create. We as in the music and the audience, the listener and the recording. And I mean, the sky's the limit. It's just like this kind of atmosphere, never ending place that I go to when I play. So, I mean, I would say mostly that with the violin, it's like an extension of my body. It's made of things very dear to me, like pine wood and gut strings and horsehair, and it's just a beautiful instrument. There's tree rosin all over the front of it and stuff. So it helps me tell gets that grit in there of where I am talking about things that I really am concerned and care about.
Let's take a listen to her impromptu performance from France. Indigenous people have made the desert their home for thousands of years. Sacred sites dot the landscape, but not all are controlled by tribal nations. One example is the Blythe Intaglio, or as the Colorado River Indian tribes call them, the Sleeping Giants. They are controlled by the Bureau of Land Management. Deb Krall is the Indigenous Affairs reporter for the Arizona Republic. She wrote about this site and others in a series called Indigenous People Find Legal, Cultural Barriers to Protect Sacred Spaces Off of Tribal Lands.
Colorado River Indians chairwoman Amelia Flores says that a lot of the stories have been lost because our oral histories didn't get transmitted, possibly due to the upheavals of the settlers coming to Arizona and California. Loss of language, probably the boarding school culture had something to do with it. But what they do know is that they do hold great cultural and in some cases spiritual significance, because generally nearby there are prayer circles inscribed. There are other trails that lead to them through the desert. There's so much significance there, and perhaps someday someone from one of the tribes will find someone who remembers.
Chairwoman Flores gives us a tour of the Intaglio in the video produced by the Arizona Republic. Let's watch.
You drive up and down 95 and you think it's just desert. It's a sacred area. There's no cathedral here. Our people walked on these lands. The land is church. We call them the Sleeping Giants rather than the Intaglios. They have been here before dirt was dirt.
Just the climate here has naturally preserved them. People have tried to date them, and they theorize that they're between 1200 CE and 900 BCE in age. It's not so important as dating them as it is, to understand the relationship between the people and the geoglyph.
The people that traveled along this river corridor knew about them. And sadly, our traditions were passed down orally and not written. Unfortunately, any true meaning of them is not here with us. I do know my elders shared with me that shaman were the ones that carved out these images in the desert pavement.
These are created by pushing away the desert pavement, the darker rocks, and exposing the lighter soil underneath. There are at least 167, intaglios or geoglyphs along the Colorado River. I know that the largest human figure out here is about 171 feet. Because of multiple federal laws, we're not allowed to provide locational information. So we usually keep it quiet. If it becomes a well-known area, like Blythe has become, then we go the extra mile and we start putting up fencing and signage, etc., to prevent people from driving over them or walking over them or damaging them in any way.
You might not even know that you're on a sleeping circle. You may not even know you're on a trail. And so just be respectful of the lands out here.
This is someone else's culture, their heritage, their religion, their sacred space, their spirituality. And, you wouldn't want someone coming into your home defacing it. And so, just leave things as they are, take pictures, take memories, but leave everything else alone.
Thank you for watching. For more news and updates, go to IndianCountryToday.com. The world remembers a grim anniversary this weekend. The world was forever changed on September 11th, 20 years ago. We honor the lives lost when the World Trade Center towers and the Pentagon were attacked and the crash of Flight 93. Our nation still heals. Stay safe, my relatives. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This is Indian Country Today.